You're listening to Fresh Look with Hen Mazzig, presented by the Israel on Campus Coalition. Welcome back to Fresh Look. We're excited to have you join us today for episode 5, featuring world-renowned Palestinian human rights activist Bassem Eid. Bassem was born in East Jerusalem and rose to prominence during the First Intifada as a senior researcher for B'Tselem. He founded the Jerusalem-based Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group and later assumed the role of chairman of the Center for Near East Policy Research. In response to the deterioration of the human rights situation under the Palestinian Authority, Bassem Eid founded the Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group, a non-partisan human rights organization dedicated to exposing human rights violations and supporting a democratic and pluralistic Palestine. Bassem has spent decades researching UNRWA policies and has written extensively on the subject of UNRWA reform. He also is an outspoken critic of the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement. Welcome to the show, Bassem Eid.
How are you? Kif Khalek, Bassem?
Yeah, very good. Alhamdulillah, khair.
Good to see you again, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to speak to you today for this show because I think, you're a well-known Palestinian activist that have been so vocal on human rights, and you're a researcher and an author, and you've done so much. And I want you to tell the audience, first of all, a bit about you and what got you to doing the work that you're doing today.
Yeah. Originally, I spent over than 30 years of my life researching human rights violations against Palestinians. Started my human rights career with an Israeli organization called B'Tselem, where I worked for 7.5 years researching, documenting the Israeli army violations against the Palestinians. And after the Oslo Accord, I decided to resign from B'Tselem and to create a Palestinian human rights organization called the Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group, in turn to continue monitoring and researching violations of human rights against the Palestinians by the Palestinian Authority and its own security forces. Unfortunately, 4 months after the foundation of the Human Rights Monitoring Group, I was arrested by Yasser Arafat, but I was so lucky that I kept in jail only for 25 hours. And the only one who interfered in my release was the former US Secretary Warren Christopher under the Bill Clinton administration. And since that release until today, I think that Yasser Arafat's detention gave to me a huge impunity from the Palestinian Authority. Don't forget that since 2002, I am living in Jericho, which is completely under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority. And since that time until today, I never ever remember that I was summoned or my door has been knocked by any of the Palestinian Authority people.
Wow. And so what got you to move to what you're doing today, to doing the work that you're doing today, to speak about this issue so openly? And aren't you afraid to do that?
No, I am sometimes Chen used to say that I am feeling more safe in Jericho rather in New York, especially in Columbia University or in Harvard University. I think that what led me to do what I am doing is the realities. I am a person who is looking to the realities on the ground. And whenever the Arabs, and mainly probably the Palestinians, who are saying that in a while, Israel will be dismatched, Israel will be disappeared. In the realities, I didn't see that. And in the realities, Israel became stronger and stronger in the Middle East. And I think that my main job today is how to persuade all the Arab world that Israel exists. Israel will never ever be trashed, and the Arabs should have to start believing in the realities. And the realities are that Israel exists, and we should have to live side by side with peace, security, a coexistence and cooperation.
Inshallah, as we say.
Inshallah, yes, I hope so.
Yeah, and I think, you touched on Yasser Arafat and a few other leaders of the Palestinian authorities in several talks of yours that I've heard. And I wanted to know, well, first of all, what do you make of Yasser Arafat? What do you make of Palestinian leadership that we had until now, the official one at least? And what do you make of Hamas, the terrorist group in Gaza? And what do you make of the Palestinian Authority? Just politically speaking, on the Palestinian leadership, what do you think about them?
I didn't see that the Palestinian Authority is really effective in the current situation. I think that you can call them the Palestinian Authority without authority. I don't think, if we will look to Jenin as an example, where is the terror is really increasing by the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Jenin. In Jenin, the Palestinian Authority security forces couldn't operate at all, couldn't enter to the refugee camps over there, couldn't go and come even to arrest criminal people. And sometimes I used to say, thanks that we have Israel, who is doing our own job here. Now towards the Hamas, I think that the Hamas is operating according to the Iranian agenda. I don't think that the Hamas or the Islamic Jihad in Gaza are really representing the Palestinian people interest. In the meantime, I think that the Hamas are almost destroyed what remains from the Israelis since 2005. If we will look to the Gaza today, we are looking to the real hell. If there is a hell in the coming world, that's going to be in Gaza, by the way. And I am talking with people over there. You couldn't believe, Chen, that the youths of Gaza, when I am talking to them, they are telling me, Bassem, if Israel will open one of its passages for 2 hours, 70% of the youths of Gaza will escape to another country. So people are staying in Gaza, waiting for the opportunity to immigrate and to escape from Gaza. That's exactly the reality in the Gaza Strip right now.
So I want to also dig a bit deeper on that, because Yasser Arafat, is a widow, and his daughter are now living in London, and they're living, they're billionaires that have such a quality of life. And we know that Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, has a wealth that is quite massive. What do you make of this corruption in those authorities?
Yeah, listen, Chen, I think that corruption almost destroyed a lot of countries around the world. Mm-hmm. One of them is the Middle East, mainly the Arab countries. Look to Africa. Look to Africa. People are living around 2.5 years or maybe more in the coronavirus, and governments in Africa has no money to buy vaccination for their own people. Why? Because of the corruption. That's exactly the same thing within the Palestinian territories these days. We know about hundreds of billions of dollars, which has been donated by different countries and different aid organizations around the world. And if you will come, nothing really built by the Palestinian Authority. Since the arrival of the Palestinian Authority in 1995 until today, I don't remember that there was one university built by the Palestinian Authority. I don't remember that there is one hospital built by the Palestinian Authority. I don't remember that there is a school built by the Palestinian Authority. So the Palestinian Authority leaders, in my opinion, are also using the Palestinian people. Not only the UN using us, not only the UNRWA using us, not only the Amnesty International using us, but even our leaders these days are the people who are using us. They are making money. They have a wonderful life. I know one of the ministers that his dog get sick. You couldn't believe that he sent it to France for treatment. Why people are suffering, people are starving in the Gaza Strip and other parts of the Palestinian territories. I think that this is what the Palestinian people should have to start realizing, that with the current Palestinian Authority, nothing will be achieved. And if the Palestinians really want to save their lives, the first thing that they should have to start their own intifada against the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, against the Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, not against the Israelis, because the Israelis right now are the one who are securing our life, in my opinion. Look to the Gaza Strip. Who is supplying the food? Who is supplying the electricity? Who is supplying the water? Who is supplying the medicines? Only Israel. I never ever heard that there is any Arab country around the world who try to supply such kind of things to the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Look to the Israelis right now, how they are trying to build a good economy in the Gaza Strip by allowing 14,000 Palestinian workers to enter to Gaza, to enter to Israel every day to work. That's bring billions of shekels a month to the Gaza Strip, which the Hamas couldn't secure that at all.
Wow. And you're saying, I mean, I think one thing that you touched on that is very important is how it's not only the Palestinian Authority. There are so many bodies, and one of the bodies that you said is the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency for the Palestinian Refugees, which we know what it is. I think maybe for our audience, can you tell us a bit about UNRWA and why is that such a big problem?
You know, UNRWA is one of the most corrupt organizations in the meantime. UNRWA is keeping the Palestinian refugees as hostages since 1952 until today. What UNRWA really did to the Palestinian refugees? I grew up in a refugee camp for 33 years in Shafat refugee camp, which still exists, and I still have 6 brothers who are living there, which I used every week or 2 weeks to go to visit them over there. In 33 years, what I really benefited from UNRWA. My father lived in a refugee camp over than 50 years. What he benefited from UNRWA. You know, sometimes people asking me, why UNRWA is not really solving the problem of the Palestinian refugees? I said, for a very simple reason. If UNRWA will solve the problem of the Palestinian refugees, then the 30,000 employees of UNRWA will become refugees and jobless. That's exactly the UNRWA. I think that UNRWA these days are fighting for their own income. They want to make sure that they still can get salaries for the coming 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 years. They are not care about the refugees. Look and see the life of the refugees. I don't want to talk, by the way, about the refugees in the West Bank or in Gaza, because the Palestinian refugees in the West Bank and Gaza, their situation is much, much, much better than other refugees like in Jordan, like in Syria, like in Lebanon. Go to Lebanon and see what's going on. Palestinian refugees are not allowed to leave the refugee camp without a permit from the government. That's a real apartheid. Where is the Amnesty International? Where is the Human Rights Watch? No, you know, to hang it on Israel, it's much more easier, it's much more comfortable, and it is much more nationalistic. You know, in terms to be nationalistic, you have only to talk about Israel and to hang your own problems on the Israelis, not on your own people.
Wow. I actually didn't know that you were from Shafat. In my service in the army, I worked for Kogat, and I was a humanitarian officer, and I worked in Shafat a lot with the UN, with the UNRWA, and I remember seeing how their I mean, seeing the Israelis the Arab Israelis that are living on the other side of the fence of Shuafat, the refugee camp, they have such a great life. But I feel like UNRWA wanted to keep, they still want to keep the refugees in Shuafat in this situation. They want to be
I think that the policy of UNRWA is how to continue keeping the Palestinian refugees in the refugee camps as hostages, because UNRWA is seeking a political solution rather than a humanitarian solution. And this is not exactly the position of UNRWA. UNRWA created in terms to provide a humanitarian aid. But right now, I think since the Oslo Agreement, UNRWA already changed its policy, and they are right now fighting for the political rights of the Palestinians rather than the humanitarian rights of the Palestinians.
Wow, that's very profound. They were founded to find relief for the Palestinian refugees, and they're looking for a political solution. And that's really the big problem. I fully agree with you. And I think another body or another movement that we're seeing that really says that they care about Palestinians, but don't really care about Palestinians is the BDS movement that I know that you're a great opponent of. What do you make of the boycott attempts of or the anti-normalization between Israelis and Palestinians? Where do you think that takes us, and why do you oppose it?
See, I think, Chen, I used to say that those thugs and gangsters who called the BDS are people who succeed to find a job for themselves forever. Because we know that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is unsolvable conflict. And why the conflict is unsolvable, so you can gain more and more money for long, long, long life. I think I used to say that the BDS is a new organization who is also using the Palestinians. I don't think that they fallen in love with us. Listen, while those gangsters demonstrating against a special business, Israeli business to be closed. Now, while those Palestinian workers who used to work at that business will be kicked out, I didn't see any aid from the BDS to those kicked out workers, or the BDS try to find jobs for them, or the BDS try to cover the medical insurance of those workers' children. I didn't see that at all. Listen, Israel is a well-organized country. Any worker, if he is an Israeli or Palestinian from the West Bank or from Gaza, if he is working in Israel, two important issues he will benefit. The first one is the national insurance. The second thing is the medical insurance for himself, for his wife, and for his children. Now, while those workers will be kicked out, the first thing is that the children are losing their medical insurance. What is the crime that those children did to the BDS? What is the crime? Tell me. So I used to say that those organizations, those countries, those parliamentarians who are financing the BDS, if we will take that budget for 2 years, I think that will improve the Palestinian economy much better than destroying the Palestinian economy via the BDS. I think that the BDS destroying the Palestinian economy before they are destroying the Israeli economy.
Wow, that's such a way to look at it. I really appreciate that perspective. And I think that everything you say, Bassem, really makes it clear that you are a humanist, that you care about...
This is the reality, Chen. You can come, you know the place. I want to call everybody who don't know Israel to come here to Israel. I am quite sure that all his mind will be upside down, and all his political views will be completely changed, and he will be afterwards a good defender for Israel.
Amazing. And I know that you're also touring campuses sometimes, like I do, and I see many young students that wants to see peace between Israel and Palestinians, and they want to both people to prosper, but they're being attacked by the BDS people on campuses. What advice do you give them? What do you tell them? What do you? What
I think, Chen, that those students, I really appreciate them. I know many, probably tens of thousands of them, that they are real fighters. I call them real fighters. They would love to see peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But of course, the BDS is not seeking peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The BDS is seeking how to destroy Israel, So anyone who try to bring peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, of course, he will be attacked by the BDS, because that's against the goal and the aims of the BDS. If you will stand tomorrow in the Columbia University, and you start shouting, "Death to Israel," they will love you. They will kiss your foot, the BDS. But if you will start calling peace between Israel and Palestinians, coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians, they will kill you. They will kill you. They attacked me. They told me once, you are not allowed to speak on behalf of the Palestinians. But one Pakistani is allowed to speak on behalf of the Palestinians. So these people, I think that the governments where these people are acting should have to start drawing laws against all the activities of these people, not what the police in America used to say, freedom of speech. Excuse me, he is threatening me that he want to shoot me. Which freedom of speech is that? And you know, that's happened to me several times, by the way, around all the states by the BDS in many campuses.
Wow. And I mean, the final question that I have, and I think it's really relates to this, is we're hoping for peace. We're praying. We both come from the same land. We share the same air. And I always hope that one day I can live with that. I can see, my heart goes out to Palestinians. I don't want them to live. I don't want anyone in this land to suffer. We're all brothers and sisters.
Right.
But
in the meantime, Chen, listen, I am a person who built almost a lot of hopes on what we called Abraham's Accord. Abraham's Accord is very, very, very important politically and economically. I think that the Palestinians will benefit from all the investment that the Kingdom of Bahrain or the United Arab Emirates who are going to invest in Israel. And I believe that those Arab countries like United Arab Emirates, like the Kingdom of Bahrain, like the Kingdom of Morocco, I hope tomorrow morning the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham's Accord. Those people can be a very good bridge for peace to bring the Israelis and the Palestinians one day together. I promise you that we should have to put a lot of hopes on the Abraham's Accord. The Abraham's Accord is going to deliver Abraham Avinu again, and then the peace will start shining in the Holy Land between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Amen.
Inshallah, amen.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much for your time, Bassem. It was such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Such a pleasure meeting you, Chen. Thank you so much for that.
Keep up the great work.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode featuring world-renowned Palestinian human rights activist, Bassem Eid. Be sure to subscribe to our channels, and we'll see you for the next episode of Fresh Look.